set. I'm just gonna stable them.
Well, yeah, you can do that, I guess. If they complain, then we'll have to.
Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, November 9th of the Oxford Board of Selectmen. I'll call this meeting to order. First agenda item is, we'll do these separately, is approval of the minutes for October 19th. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I make that motion?
Second the motion.
Have a motion and a second, comments? Call for vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. Those meeting minutes are approved. Now I'd entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of November 3rd, 2021.
Second the motion.
Have a motion and a second. Any comments? Call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. Those meetings are approved. Next item on our agenda is set a date for the special election for the debt exclusion for street improvements and approval language for the ballot question for a special town election. I believe we have our town clerk here to help us. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board. So as you can see in your packet, I've given you a few dates to choose from. The earliest that the town could hold an election would be December 14th. I'm not really in favor of that date because there's so many things going on. I also gave you another date of January 4th, which would be much better for my office concerning the beginning of the year. You know, we have the census, the dogs, conflict of interest that we're preparing for. So that would be a much better date for the clerk's office. Another thing to take into consideration is the December 14th, the last day to register to vote is the night before Thanksgiving. And my office would have to stay open till 8, which we know that people aren't gonna be out registering to vote. So that's another thing to take into consideration. Also, staffing would be a problem in December, whereas everyone will most likely be home by January, after the holidays. So I've given you the 2 different calendars. As I previously mentioned, I'm really in favor of a Tuesday election. People get confused if you switch days. They don't like it if it's on a Wednesday or a Thursday. So that's why I have chosen the 2 Tuesdays.
All right, thank you. Board members, any comments? Yes.
I have a quick question. In reading over the meeting information, the 4th, is that the 90th day?
Yes.
So my only question in regards to that is barring weather.
It has to be held.
So you have to
Yep.
hold it regardless?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right, I'm all set, thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the January 4th, 2022 special election date.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Do we have to read the setting the date and then set the ballot with that motion also? The verbiage for the ballot?
No, I'd like to do them separately.
Separately?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. I
That's why
second the
did it
January
that
4th.
way, so.
Yes.
All right, any other questions or comments? Then I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That's 3 in affirmative, 1 absent, so that'll be the special election. Now we go on to the ballot question. By council. Does board members have any questions about that? Not hearing any, then I would entertain a motion to approve the ballot question as written tonight by council.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Yes.
please just
Sure.
request that you read the specific language
Read it?
from
Okay.
bond council?
Right, all right.
Thank you.
This is, shall the town of Oxford be allowed to exempt from the provisions of Proposition 2 1/2, so-called, the amounts required to pay for the bonds issued in order to pay costs of engineering, designing, constructing, and reconstructing roadways throughout the town, including the payment of all other costs incidental and related thereto. And that's what the question would, how it would be presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent, and that's how it'll go.
Thank you.
Michelle, very much for
Have a good
coming this
night.
evening. All right, next item, we have a request to hold the Veterans Day Parade this Thursday, November 11th, which is requested by the American Legion Post 58. I'd entertain a motion to approve that parade.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the parade, which would begin at the Senior Center at 10:45. And with that, I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. They are approved. We'll see you all there, hopefully. All right, we have, next item is a liquor license change of manager request. Daniel Darlock, which is the Pine Ridge Country Club LLC. She is present at this meeting. We have all her information. Would you like to come up, Danielle?
Would
and-
you like me to come up?
Yeah, just come up and that way there people can see your face and those that don't know you, welcome.
Hello, everybody.
And so you are the present manager, and so we want to change it from the previous manager, which was
Can do, Cat.
Cat.
I got you.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So board members, any questions, comments, concerns?
Looks like the paperwork's all in order.
Very good. Then I would entertain a motion to approve the change of manager to Danielle at Pine Ridge.
I make the motion to accept Daniel Dalek as the new manager.
Second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Does,
Call for a vote.
is that subject to the ABCC approval?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do we need
good
to
point.
amend the motion
Yeah.
to make it subject?
Good point. And then, yes.
Yes, I will amend the motion to include subject to the ABCC for approval.
I'll second that.
Right. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for
very
coming.
much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Next thing we have is a vote to order investigation by our animal control officer of a dangerous nuisance dogs. This complaint was filed by Susan Stephanie Dudding. The owner is David J. Tremblay of 8 Wayne Ave. So what we are voting on is to allow our ACO, Kelly Flynn, to conduct an investigation. I'd entertain a motion.
I will make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to allow our ACO to investigate this situation. Any comments? Yes.
Quick question. I don't recall in the past ever ordering the investigation ourselves. Usually it's done. Is it because it was a police report filed?
No, it's, we found that
Got it.
things need to change. How's that for an answer? So that's why we're doing it this way.
Okay, no problem.
All right. And any other questions? I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. She can investigate that situation. Next item is a vote to set a public hearing date for our dangerous nuisance dog complaint, which is the same Stephanie Dunning about dog owner David J. Tremblay of 237A Main Street, Oxford.
I make a motion to set the public hearing in regards to this issue for November 30th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Since this is a public hearing, do we have to have a time for this? So do we want to say like 7:30?
Yes, I'll amend my motion to request the public hearing at 7:30 that
Right.
evening.
Second.
Great. Then I will call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. That's when we'll have that hearing. Thank you. Next item is Cultural Council appointments. We have 2 people, Albert Zelli and Debbie Horgan, I'm sorry. And these are appointments for a 3-year term expiring on June 30th, 2024. Pleasure of the board.
I make a motion to appoint Albert Zelli of 97 Levitt Road in Oxford and Debbie Horgan of 2 Hillcrest Circle, also of Oxford, for each of them for a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2024 to the Oxford Cultural Council.
Second.
Great. Any more comments or questions? Then I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. They are approved, and we thank you for coming forward. Next item, we have a request to use Joslyn Park December 19th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. for a food drive and visit with Santa, which is requested by the Oxford Lions Club. I would entertain a motion to approve this request.
I make a motion that the Oxford Lions Club be granted permission to use Joslyn Park to hold a food drive and visit with Santa on December 19th, 2021 from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. They are approved. Good luck. They always do a good job. A lot of people attend. Okay, let's see. We can't do the next one, so we'll go to, the next item is vote to set winter parking bans. In the past, we've set the parking bans from December 1st through April 1st. Notice of the parking ban is on-street parking is prohibited between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. The parking ban will also take effect when there is an accumulation of 3 or more inches of snow, day or night. 15-minute parking is allowed for postal and package delivery. So, unless you have any other ideas, I'd entertain a motion to approve that parking ban.
I make a motion to set the winter parking ban from December 1st, 2021 through April 1st of 2022.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. That is when our ban will take effect with those other restrictions also. So, next item is the town manager update on Access Oxford. Town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to begin in terms of providing this update, thanking Selectman LeBlanc for requesting this item on the agenda. I think while the Board of Selectmen has been aware of the ongoing status of Access Oxford, it's not necessarily been presented in a holistic manner. And with the vacancy in the position of media production coordinator, I recognize that there may be some questions that arise to how we got to this point in the history of Access Oxford, and I think for the public benefit it might be good to go through that history. So the first part of it is when you look at Access Oxford, the history is that it was incorporated in 2003 as a nonprofit tax-exempt corporation. And most recently, the contract that the town had made with Access Oxford as a nonprofit corporate entity with a board of directors was in February 10th of 2018. That was before I came here, and the contract had been set to expire February 10th, 2021. The purpose of that contract was to provide public educational and governmental cable access programming in Oxford. And the town had received approximately $160,000 per year from Charter, which is our cable provider, in quarterly payments. In the last year, that amounted to closer to $172,000, but the funds that we would receive on a quarterly basis were deposited into a so-called agency fund. and the town would make quarterly payments to Access Oxford in the same amount. So on October 23rd, in 2019, Roselli, Clark and Associates, who are our financial auditors, had actually formally put the town on notice that this pass-through, which was the so-called agency fund, could not occur. Many towns had treated PEG funds in a variety of ways, including that way, but many of them had already changed over based on a ruling that came out, or an information guideline release that was issued by the Mass Department of Revenue, saying that those funds in both 2016 and another 2 releases extending the deadline up until 2018, that towns had to adopt an enterprise fund or a receipts reserved revolving fund. This issuance said that in 2018, that in the absence of a municipality actually adopting the PEG Cable Access Enterprise Fund or Receipts Reserve Fund, all the unspent PEG funds should be transferred to the town's general fund. Roselli, Clark and Associates, our financial audit, recommended that the town transfer all the unspent PEG access funds to the general fund in accordance with Department of Revenue regulations. Even in 2018, my first visit with our financial director and also meeting our representative from DOR mentioned that this was a problem for the town and it had to be fixed, and it should have been fixed already. So they had suggested we adopt a receipts reserve fund at town meeting and to consult with legal counsel to evaluate amending the agreement that we had with Access Oxford going forward. So in December 2019, the chairman issued a letter to Access Oxford's Board of Directors and had explained the information received from our financial auditors. It informed that Access Oxford Board that the town had not established a PEG Cable Access Enterprise Fund or Receipts Reserved Revolving Fund. It informed Access Oxford Board that the town would be depositing PEG funds into the general fund. And we also informed Access Oxford Board of Directors that since the state law does not allow the town to incur a liability in excess of an available appropriation, that the town will not have the funds to be able to support the contract, which basically rendered the contract void. This letter that came from our chairman also stated that Access Oxford would not receive any funding until, at the earliest, depending on what steps the town meeting would take, July 1st of 2020. Selectman Lash letter on behalf of the board and the town recognized the difficult position and requested a meeting to discuss the next steps. January 6th was a meeting that we held in 2020, meeting with the Access Oxford Board members and their executive director. And after that meeting, there was a letter that was issued at that time by the Access Oxford Board of Directors, which had enumerated the following comments. One, that the board did not feel that it had been treated in good faith and were dismayed by the letter that had come from the Board of Selectmen and the town. The Board of Directors for Access Oxford had disagreed with the town's assertion that the contract would be void, despite what was being told to us by the state's Department of Revenue and our auditors and our town council. However, if the contract was no longer in effect, this letter also stated that Access Oxford was going to be unable to provide PEG programming. In that letter, they asked for an additional meeting with town, but had a demand of it being no later than January 13th. And in seeking that issuance of a demand, they also wanted the following: a definitive time frame for the creation and funding of the Receipts Reserved Revolving Fund, a process and timeline for a bidding process for future PEG services, mutually agreeable solution to the funds viewed to be owed to Access Oxford for the services rendered, claiming that the $90,000 was owed for quarter 3 and 4. They're based on a calendar year, not the fiscal year, the same way we are. in 2019. They stated they would continue to provide services until that future meeting of the demand date of January 13th. On January 8th, 2020, we had a response to the Access Oxford Board by Town Council. It asserted that the board was aware of the issue with the PEG funding prior to December 20th, 2019 letter that was issued by our board. In other words, our Town Council had said that the Board of Directors for Access Oxford would have been aware of this issue. It was no surprise to Access Oxford Board of Directors regarding the information that was discussed at the January 6th meeting. Access Oxford did nothing with that information that they had received regarding the funding. There was also in this letter a response from our council that said discontinuing service was at odds with what was said at the meeting that we held in the presence of our legal counsel by the members that were in attendance and also the executive director about what they would be willing to continue to provide. With regards to the contract being void and there being a challenge by Access Oxford Board members and the executive director saying that they were dismayed that the contract couldn't be void, our legal counsel had said the following: if a contract is inconsistent with law, it is voided by the action of law. This contract, which was not bid and which requires payment from funds not available for such purpose, this is simply not an enforceable contract. And that happens actually all over the state. You can't have a contract in a municipal form of government if there is no funding source for it. Also in that letter, the town noted that it was not in a position to provide timelines with establishing the fund requiring town meeting approval. So we could actually say we wanted to make these steps, but we would not be able to establish a timeline, especially because town meeting could have voted not to do that. And the town also at that time couldn't issue any timeframes with regards to the other aspects requested in their letter. So January 10th, there was another communication that came from Access Oxford Board to the Board of Selectmen, which asserted that they would like to know if they would have liked to have known that town council was going to be present at the January 6th meeting, so they could have invited their council. They were wondering why the town had not taken action to resolve the statutory issue with the treatment of funds earlier. So they were challenging the town about why they didn't take steps earlier. They stated in the position they stated that they were in the position to wind up their operations and file for dissolution, even though they had said before they were going to continue to operate. They also had asserted in this letter that they would continue to operate without the 2019 quarterly payments of Q3 and Q4 and absorb the operating costs going forward. They raised the issue that there would be no guarantee that Access Oxford would win the bid of future bidding process. That was asked, why we couldn't guarantee the bid towards Access Oxford. We then had in this letter from Access Oxford, they were also saying they did not have funds to cover a year and a half of costs without a guarantee of payment. And this email correspondence from Access Oxford was also followed up with an email from a board member dated January 10th that this communication was actually penned by Tristan Kipax at that time. So January 12th, we had a correspondence coming from Access Oxford Board to the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, the Finance Committee, the School Committee, and also the staff of both the town and the schools. And this communication basically said that Access Oxford would like to inform the town of Oxford that starting January 13th, 2020, they would start the process of collecting their equipment from the various locations throughout the town. So January 13th, there was a communication that came from myself, my office, to the Access Oxford Board, and it had asserted that Access Oxford had actually sufficient funds to provide continued services through, at a minimum, of the first 2 quarters of 2020. The 2018 report indicated, the report of Access Oxford, indicated the beginning balance was $128,411.93, and their ending balance was $160,050.95, and their overall revenues were $172,000. Access Oxford had substantial reserves that were based on payments the town received from Charter for the purpose of PEG funding, which was then provided to Access Oxford. If the future services were not going to be rendered, the funds should be remitted back to the town as the purpose of providing PEG programming would cease. However, instead of seeking the return of these funds, the town, in this letter, was going to ask Access Oxford to continue to provide the services by utilizing the remaining funds in this substantial reserve account. There was no need to actually have a further meeting at that town because a warrant article was going to be placed at the May town meeting to establish the account. We couldn't predict whether or not the article was going to pass. We couldn't speculate as to the appropriation into the account, and no decision had, at that time, been able to be determined about the scope and the timing for any potential RFP or formal bidding process. They were correct in the sense that there is no guarantee that Access Oxford would win the bid. And then the final portion of that letter was requesting that no equipment be removed from town property until the matter was resolved. On January 17th, 2020, the communication between counsel for Access Oxford and our town council, there was the communication on behalf of their board that no choice they had but was to dissolve the corporation, that Access Oxford has remaining assets. They acknowledged that. They didn't actually acknowledge how much. They said that they were going to proceed in accordance with the Mass Attorney General's requirements for dissolution of a charitable corporation. The town did not take into account the costs of dissolution and fiduciary and legal obligations of Access Oxford. They had asserted that in their letter, and they also had written that they would be meeting on February 12th as a board to discuss their dissolution process, their financial obligations that they would be faced by the corporation in the coming months, and the financial resources that would remain after expenses were paid. Also, the options for continued operations. At that time, they also had a videographer who had resigned, and Access Oxford would need to retain a qualified videographer. January 17th, there was a communication from the manager to the various boards and staff informing them that Access Oxford would no longer be filming meetings, and the town manager would be working to find an interim solution. At that time, we had also received some emails from the school department revealing that, to their knowledge, they had not received certain types of equipment in terms of it being donated, and most, if not all, the equipment that they had received was antiquated. We were looking at this as we were trying to attract someone as an interim solution. January 30th, 2020, we had received an email from Selectman Troiano to the staff asking, could we please update us with the status of cable access issue, as well as inform us how the videoing is being handled moving forward. Additionally, where is the funding for the videoing coming from? I sent this board on January 31st a memo in answering that question. It was a response to the entire board based on that inquiry, saying that we were still working on the matter with town council, that all PEG funds had been moved into the general fund per the auditor and Department of Revenue's prompting, that the town was aware that Access Oxford had significant reserves, that the school was using a teacher to film meetings, and that the town is using an independent, non-contracted vendor for services out of a professional services account. February 27th, 2020, there was a communication from our council to Access Oxford, from the council of Access Oxford to our town council, and Access Oxford had stated that they could continue some services based on the previous memorandums that they had received from my office and legal counsel. They said that instead of dissolving and not providing, that now we're going to provide some services. It included filming and broadcasting content for PEG channels, rebroadcasting town meetings through January of 13th of 2020, making the studio available to community members for individual and community projects, filming and broadcasting community events such as the Easter and Memorial Day events, and then after June 1st, they would be terminating use of their rental space and proceeding with dissolution. March 4th, there was a communication between our town council and Council for Access Oxford, seeking clarification as to what the specific services would be. Would there be a written agreement outlining those services, our town council asked, and a clarification as to the status of the equipment held by Access Oxford that was purchased for the benefit of the town. March 9th, 2020, there was a communication between our council, and Access Oxford Council. The letter from Access Oxford clarified those services that were going to be offered. They said they would rebroadcast meetings recorded prior to January 13th, 2020, but nothing going forward. The town, it had indicated, had physical possession of equipment located in the town hall and high school and considers the equipment to be the property of the town. And Access Oxford would not be able to resume full range of services as they are dissolving. So June 30th, 2020, there was a communication again from Access Oxford to the town saying that they were leaving all the equipment at the town hall, high school, and items at the community center, and that Access Oxford would not be operational as of July 1st, 2020. So that brings us, and I'll quickly wrap up here because I know we have our continued hearing. I mean, what we know and what we don't know. So what we know is that Access Oxford was dissolved by a court order by the Secretary of State's office on December 11th, 2020. The last annual report filed with the Secretary of State's office was its annual report of 2019. There was not another one after that. Access Oxford did leave the town with some equipment. The majority of that equipment was outdated. There were items on the inventory list that were not transferred to the town, to my knowledge, whether it's MacBook Pros or various iPads, or iPhones, Bose heads, modulators. There were a number of items that were not returned to the town. Access Oxford also have funds that they had in their possession in a reserve account. We're not sure about what happened to those funds, the exact amount of those funds, but we do understand that there has also been a request to the Attorney General to ensure that all the proper procedures were followed in the dissolution of Access Oxford, and to my knowledge, I don't think they've gotten a final report. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to explain and to the public how we arrived at this point with Access Oxford and to present the information in as comprehensive and succinct manner, but also in terms of the future of cable access programming. As you know, we do have services being provided inside town government now, and you'll hear an update in my town manager's report in terms of staffing for that area. Thank you.
All right, well, we do have a 7:30 public hearing meeting, so we'll have to switch over to that. All right, and I'll read the notice into the record. Please take notice that the Oxford Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, October 19, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. in the Selectmen's meeting room on the second floor of the Town Hall, which is located at 325 Main Street, Oxford, Mass., on the matter of selecting a residential factor, which will determine the percentages of tax to be borne by each class of property for the fiscal year 2022. Please take notice that the Oxford Board of Selectmen will continue the public hearing concerning on the matter of selecting a residential factor to Tuesday, November 9th at 7:30 p.m. This hearing has been continued from the original hearing dated October 19th, 2021. And with that, welcome.
Good evening.
Guess we got all our ducks in a row, hopefully.
We are ready to go. So, kind of like to do just a brief overview of how we make our way to this hearing, setting the values of properties, and, you know, classifying properties based on commercial, industrial, personal property, and then, you know, really how we go from measuring sales to getting myself in front of the board, ready to set the tax rate for the fiscal year. So every 5 years, every year, the assessments need to be at 100% of full and fair cash value for properties in town. We do this through a sales analysis. Every 5 years, it's called either a reval year or a certification year, which is essentially the Department of Revenue does a deep dive into the work we do every year and make sure that we're doing it right. So that's coming up next year, so I just want to add a teaser in there, because you'll see some budget information from me for that. So this year is our last, what we call an interim year adjustment. So for me, it doesn't change the way we set values. We still do all the same legwork. I just produce less reports for the Department of Revenue, and they don't have somebody physically here looking over my shoulder and seeing how the process is done. But I know in the past, people would think that we only changed values on a certification year. We don't. We do change values every year based on sales. So, so that's that's sort of the long view of the scope of the office.
Do you mind just repeating that for me for a quick second? So you said we evaluate property values every year, but we reeval every 5 years?
Certification year is every 5 years. It used to be every 3 years. Now it's
That's what
every
I thought. I was
5.
like,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, Municipal Modernization Act came in 2019, I think.
Okay,
So our last certification year was fiscal year 18.
got it.
So, yep, fiscal year 2023 will be our 5 years.
But we do adjust values every year as well?
Every year, we adjust values based on sales. So we go through the full sales analysis of, you know, the assessment to sales ratio, so the assessed value of properties divided by the sale prices of properties. They meet statistical guidelines of the Department of Revenue, same statistical guidelines we meet during a certification year. It's just we give them the data, it calculates, and they say, yep, you meet stats. Nothing really raises a red flag, and you go through. Whereas on a certification year, they'll come out and they'll inspect 100 properties, 150 properties in town themselves. They'll physically go to all the properties, make sure our data collection passes, so that, you know, if we exceed a certain percentage of error rate, then the town would have to do a full data collection. So that would mean bringing in a vendor and visiting all 6,000 properties in town. So the certification year, if you think of it, it's really an audit of the operations of my office by the Department of Revenue. So.
That helped. Thank you for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So, setting a tax rate, the tax rate calculation, again, we talk about setting the tax rate. We're meeting here to set the tax rate, but it's really a mathematical equation. It's a very simple one. It's the total amount that we can collect in taxes for real and personal property divided by the total value of property in town. So multiply it by 1,000, and you come up with a tax rate. When you look at it, the numerator is really a budgeting item, and then denominator is a measurement item. It's what I do through the sales analysis. So divided by, you know, do the math, and we get a tax rate. That part's really simple. So when we look at a sales analysis, what we need to do is, when I talk about statistical guidelines, our largest class has to be has to have an ASR, so assessment as a numerator, sales price as a denominator, between 90 and 1.1. So we all do math. That means between 90 and 100%, or not 90 and 110%. If I did that over 100%, there would be 3,600 homeowners at my door looking for an abatement. So the reality is, it's between 90 and 100%. Now, each subclass has to be within 5 percentage points of that. So if I was at 100% for single-family homes Everything else would have to be between 95 and 105%. So again, you get classes that could go over 100%, and they rightfully should be lining up my office asking for an abatement. So really you target 96, 95, 97%. That way you have enough room that the class can be within 5 points of this, but not go below the 90, and clearly not go above the functional limit of 100%. So you can see this year we had 3,716 parcels of single-family homes. Total sales greater than 1,000 is 194. Total arm's length sales, so this is willing buyer, willing seller, not bank sales, not foreclosures, not sales to a neighbor, not sales to family, is 126. That's an important number. We have to meet 2% of sales. You see the next line, 3.39%. We have to meet 2% to be statistically significant. So that the analysis we're doing is meaningful. It's real. If we don't reach 2%, we have to use 2 years of sales and hopefully reach 2%. Once you go beyond 2 years of sales, you're really messing with market trends and you're not getting real good information out of it. So for Oxford, we meet the 2% in both single-family homes and condos. Everything else, when you look below, the miscellaneous, that's trailer parks and parcels with more than one house on them. 2 families, 3 families, apartments, land, and commercial and industrial, all was done with 2 years of sales. So that was done with sales through calendar year 19 and 20. So again, you can see that our ASR for this year is 95, so essentially meaning 95% with a COD of 8.41. Without getting too deep into statistics, the coefficient of dispersion, what that means is how far away from the line am I? So if I have garbage, but that median meets 95, that doesn't do any good. So the lower the COD, the closer everyone is to that 95%. So that's just saying how good a job I'm doing. You know, a really good year, you get down to 2 or 3. You know, some years you just have some outliers and we've had outliers with the COVID sales. Very, very challenging in a different way. So if I can run quickly through, you can see condos 91, no sales of 103, 109, so that's why that's a 0. 99 for 2-family, 97 for 3-family, 94 for apartments, 96 for land, 96 for commercial, and 99 for industrial. And just as a note, that COD, it also applies to each one of those. So those numbers all have to meet statistical significance too. So that's how we adjust our models. Once our models are adjusted, we adjust the models for the sale prices of all for the properties that sold. So we take the ranches that sold, and we adjust them, and we take the capes that sold, and we adjust them. Once we meet the statistics, we apply those models back to all the other properties. So people wonder, well, I didn't do anything to my house, how did my value change? This is how your value changed. We took the 20 ranches that sold and said, well, they went up by 20%. So we take all the other ranches in town, and from a simplistic standpoint, we raise them by that 20%. Basically, we apply the new models to those properties as well. And that's how we come up with the new assessed values. So here is a simplified version of what's called the LA4. It's a form that we submit to the Department of Revenue. I can just touch on a couple of real highlights. Class 1, total Class 1, it went from $1.227 billion to $1.309 billion. That's from 2020 through 2021 for an increase of 6.6%. Commercial, industrial, and personal property increased just over 13%. It's interesting, I wanted to bring up this point tonight because we talk about the change in values based on during COVID. So I took a look at fiscal year 2019, so the last year we had a tax rate that wasn't impacted by COVID. The real estate market wasn't impacted by COVID. The total Class 1, so that's residential properties, was $1,055,229, I'm sorry, $22,946. 2022, you can see this on here, $1,309,249,094, an increase of $254,226,148. It's an increase of 25% during the plague. That is incredible. And those are based on sales, people buying and selling properties. So that's I thought that was kind of a stunning number to look at.
I hear it.
You hear it on the news, you hear it, yeah, and we're measuring it downstairs.
My daughter's been trying to buy a house, and bidding wars are ridiculous. And looking at the houses, you say, how do they get that kind of money? But that's what they're getting.
Yeah, so I just thought those are some interesting statistics from inside the numbers, so. So that covers the denominator, the value of all property in town. Now we'll move over to the numerator and how much we can collect in taxes. So, again, this is all prescribed based on Proposition 2.5, and this is the actual Proposition 2.5 calculation here. Some people think, well, my bill can't go up by 2.5%. That's not accurate. Proposition 2.5 prescribes how much the town can increase the amount of real and personal property taxes they increase in a year. So the total amount we can collect increases by 2.5%. When I do the math on basically how things change within that mix, that's how we slice up that pie. So an individual bill can go up by more or less than the 2.5%. So when we look at the calculation here, the FY 2021 levy limit, so last year's levy limit is our starting point. From that, we get our 2.5% that we're allowed to increase the levy of $625,772. Again, straightforward, simple math. We are allowed to add new growth, so if a new house is constructed, we're able to increase the levy also by that amount. So that is just part of Prop 2.5. So this year we had $330,333 of new growth. Subtotal, $25,986,965. Now we talk about debt exclusions, capital exclusions, and overrides. Overrides wouldn't show up on this line because they're permanent, but any kind of capital exclusion or debt exclusion is then added in. So this is the interest and the service on the principal for any of the schools or police station that we have outstanding. So that's for this year is $407,306. We add them together, that's the maximum allowable levy. We do the math based on the budget, and you come up with the difference between what we absolutely could collect and what we're actually going to collect. And that's our excess levy capacity of $61,637. And the total amount we're going to collect, $26,332,634.
Can I,
Certainly.
one quick question?
Yep.
The new growth,
Mm-hmm.
330,333, is that typical for towns? Like,
We average, usually I budget around 250 to be conservative because we're sort of putting budgets together in the spring and we don't really measure new growth until June, sometimes later. Sometimes you have big projects. This year we had a little bit of a big project, not a massive one, but a solar array that came online. So we've gone as high as I think 400, but usually between 250 and 350 is a pretty stable. And when we talk about the Department of Revenue, when they review our new growth, they actually use a 3-year average. And if we go too far out, they're going to dig in and say, okay, this doesn't look right. What changed? What really changed? So, you know, we have a big IPG building coming on, and I'm sure that'll be a trigger for them next year. So, so that's a typical amount that we get.
Okay.
So if I pull back up, tax rate calculation that we looked at before, fill it in with the numbers that we have based on, you know, the building out the different information. We just run the formula, and you can see that we're looking at a tax rate of 1616 for this fiscal year. Selectman Daniels asked me before the meeting what our tax rate was last year, so I thought I'd make a point. Last year was 1653, so we've gone down quite a bit this year. And that's what we'd expect with values going up, is that the tax rate should move in the opposite direction. So now we're here and we're talking about a classification hearing. What is the classification hearing? It's determining the tax burden to be borne by the different classes of property. It's, excuse me. Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56, allows by vote of selectmen a shift in the tax burden between property classes. And this is prescribed in law, how you can shift it, how much you can shift, the maximum amount of shift that we all have to work within. What this does is you can go over 100% on commercial property and lower the residential tax rate. You can't lower the residential or raise the residential and lower commercial. That's not an option. The only option is to pretty much give breaks to your residential taxpayers. And there are some other mixes in there with some commercial exemptions, and then your chapter, because chapter land, your farmland, and your forestry land is actually under commercial. So if you didn't want to hit them with an increase in taxes, there's some mix in there as well. So what are, whoop, falling behind. I hope you guys have this in front of you. Okay, so what are the classes of property? I think these are all mostly familiar for folks. You know, we have residential land, houses, apartments, condos, commercial, your stores, coffee shops, industrial, manufacturing, warehouses, you know. The one most taxpayers don't consider is personal property, which is part of commercial industrial. So that's for businesses only. Computers, refrigeration units, equipment, things like that is personal property. So not vehicles which fall under excise, and not real property that falls under real property. So what are we considering when we talk about classification? The big one I always focus on is the mix of commercial, industrial, personal property to residential. This year, just over 80% is residential, and just under 20% for commercial, industrial, personal property. I know I've been in front of some of you for multiple years and been talking about how we've been growing. The past 2 years, we've actually gone down a little bit. That is not any kind of weakness in commercial or lack of growth in commercial. It's just the torrid pace that the residential is going. That 24% in the last 2 years, it's just, they're just worth more. It's not that segment is growing faster. It's just the value is increasing at a higher rate. So one of my graphs, 2008, my first year before this board, we were just over 16% commercial. So looking at it now, 19.65%. That's 21% increase in the commercial, how much of the levy the commercial is taking up. So when I talk about that mix, they're growing, they're taking more of the tax burden organically just because they're growing in town. So some of the issues when we also take a look at this is look inside of commercial industrial. What types of businesses are we looking at? When we look at big box stores, you know, we have Market Basket and Walmart. Well, those are $25 million out of $130 million of commercial. So, you know, sometimes you get that instinct that, well, we're going to go after the big guy, but you're not necessarily just going after the big guy. You're also going after a lot of little guys and a lot of medium guys. When we talk about how much relief would you be giving to a residential property when you shift this burden to a commercial? Is that, you know, is it really something that's going to help a resident without crushing a commercial. And, you know, and clearly, the higher percentage the commercial, the easier that gets. And I'll show you some numbers shortly. Will the SIP shift negatively affect commercial industrial investment? We've had pretty good growth in town with commercial industrial. IPG has done a lot, and they're still doing a lot. And hopefully we have some other things that are coming through. So, you know, historically, we've had good growth. We have heard in meetings, you know, the tax rate is a factor. You know, you're building a $20 million building here in Worcester, all of a sudden that $150,000, $200,000 difference in tax bill doesn't change if you're in Worcester, whereas in Oxford, it stays out of your long-term expenses. So there are those considerations. And what services do they use for commercial industrial? You know, are they using students in the school, which would be our most expensive service? You know, police, fire, those types of things. Sure, they use services, but what services are they using? So just some things to think about when we talk about considering a split tax rate. And everyone good?
Yes.
Everyone good at home? So when we talk about shifting the burden, you can see the classification of 1, a residential factor of 1, same tax rate for both residential and commercial. Shifting a 1% burden from residential to commercial, you can see we dropped the tax rate for the residential 16 cents per thousand, which is nice. But you see what happens on the residential side. It goes up to 1681. My math is incorrect here. I have an error on my slide. Every 16-cent reduction in the residential rate results in that should be a 65-cent increase on the commercial. But that's still just over 4 to 1. So every penny you take off the residential tax rate, you add 4 to the commercial industrial personal property. So if you think of that on a $400,000 house, you would take off about $40 and you would add $160 to a $400,000 commercial. And that's just for a single penny. You know, I did this in 1% changes, so it'd be even more of a drastic shift. So that's where we get into, you know, the benefit of a small reduction for residential. Is it worth it to that cost of the increase on a commercial? So I ran this down to 95%. You can see we get down to 1537. Tax rate goes up to 1939. So it's you can see how much it leverages that burden to the commercial. A couple other recap figures that were touched on earlier in the presentation, but one that I am required to make sure that I inform the board of. New growth again. Excess levy capacity, $61,637.05. That's the difference between what we could collect and what we are collecting. And new growth amount is $330,333. So I would recommend that we adopt a residential tax factor of 1 for a single tax rate for fiscal year 2022 of 1616, and I would be thrilled to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Board members, questions?
I actually have a couple. And I'm actually gonna rely upon your quickness here. So, one of the last slides, you mentioned that you need to make sure that we're aware of the new growth number, that 330. So my question is that what if new growth exceeded that? Meaning, what if new growth, turned out to be $1 million that particular year for whatever reason? How does that play with? Does that hurt the formula, or does it help it?
That would depend on where the new growth comes from. So if the new growth comes in on the commercial side, that would clearly help the formula. If it comes in on the residential side, it would hurt the form. It would add that leverage. You know, if you think of it leverage. And just as a point to clarify, because when we talk about splitting the rate, when we measure new growth, we use last year's tax rate. So,
Okay.
so that number comes, so anything you do tonight doesn't change that number. That number right now is approved, set in stone, and that has been measured and set, so.
Okay. Understand. And then, and I think I asked this question last year, so I apologize.
I'll write it down so I'll get it in the slides next year.
Not that I'll remember it next year either, but there was a slide towards the beginning, and I think there were, was it 84 properties? Oh, 248 properties that are exempt. Would that be, like municipal buildings, churches,
Exactly.
nonprofits, or something along those
Army Corps of
lines?
Engineer
Oh, yeah.
land.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yep, that's on our LA4.
All right, got it. Okay, those are the only, wonderful presentation, that was really,
Thank you.
I feel like an underachiever every time you come in here, you know, all these things, but, no, fabulous, I love it. Thank you for breaking it down so well, it really helps a lot.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
Just thank you for doing this presentation. I'm sure it takes a while to put the presentation together and put all that information together and be able to explain it to us. And I think this is the second or third year that you've done this for us, and every year I feel like I learn a little bit more about the tax rate and all that. And so, thank you.
Thank you.
For the hard work.
I agree, because it's, you've gotten better and better as somebody that doesn't understand, you know, how you evaluate. You know, you make it very clear, I think, and, you know, it's just funny. I've always lived people have always told me, well, when your value of your house goes up, the tax rate goes down. When the value of your house goes down, the tax rate goes up, and they just keep playing with that. And this is kind of what we're doing, right?
It's exactly what we're doing. Thank you.
Very, very good. I'd entertain a motion. Personally, I have to go by a member that was part of this board for many, many years, always made a point of saying that once you leave that factor of one category, it's very difficult to get back to it, and I've always taken heart to that, so I'll leave it up to the board and entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to adopt a residential tax factor of 1 for a single tax rate for FY 2022 of 1660.
I second that motion.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any more comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I can just say one thing. You know, as part of the key performance indicators for the Assessors Department, which has gone through some tremendous changes, particularly with the loss of one of our long-term employees due to unforeseen circumstances and with a potential succession retirement in the midst. I want to say that unequivocally, Chris has risen to the challenges that we've come to try to make in the assessor's office. It's no accident to not give credit last year, and I'm going to do it again this year, for changing the entire software program in the middle of a pandemic. It was not easy. Chris did take that to heart. We worked very closely, both Katie and I, with him. And one of the reasons you see these wonderful presentations is Chris has always been highly competent and skilled at this, but we always want to take his knowledge that is so germane to him to get it out into the public, and you're doing a great job, and I just wanted to tell you that.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So with that, I'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. We have set the residential factor over 1 for tax rate. Thank you very much, Chris. All right, so let us get back to, let's see, we were talking about the status of Access Oxford, and our manager pretty much gave us a pretty good update. Any questions about Access Oxford, I guess, after that?
I have a couple of quick ones.
Yes.
This is more
go back to that,
Or,
sorry.
so this is more of an, I don't understand this piece of it, and that is that, so the PEG channels, which I think are like 191, 192, 93 on the cable, do we own them? Meaning, can we broadcast information, or do we need a separate entity to do that? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
No, the town, you as a board signed over licensing agreement with Charter,
Yeah.
from what I understand. And part of that agreement says that they will give you 3 stations, one for education, one for government, one for public, to be able to use it for informational purposes. So the the Access Oxford's never owned those. They were under agreement with the town to be able to use those.
Gotcha, okay, so they were kind of like the facilitator, so to speak. Okay. So, do we, I mean, and I understand that the whole Access Oxford thing has been somewhat churlish, for lack of a better word, but do we have any intentions of going back in using those PEG channels versus the, like the YouTube channel?
I think we've said it a couple different times at different points during this transition, that there was a person who was, and I mentioned it in the
Yeah.
report here for an update, that we did bring on a vended contractor at that time, not having access to different equipment during that time period where there was being legally challenged and legal challenges related to that. That meant that the person who was contracted at that time was using their own equipment. They didn't have access to any licensing agreements that Access Oxford might have had at the time. So we did that, and we knew that we were going to need updated equipment, because at some point you have to be able to use certain types of equipment that marry up with one another. I am not a cable expert, and I'm not even getting to that, but we, if you remember, the town meeting had created these accounts, but we needed to also wait until town meeting could create those, and also to build up a reserve in those in which to appropriate. We did set up a position, funding for a position, the media production coordinator, who you all had seen, who had also done vendor contracting for the town. And, but despite that, still didn't have the ability, equipment-wise, to be able to just produce live, and that has been a problem, which is why, why we had actually taken it to town meeting to get the equipment. That was delayed, and so now we're back to spring town meeting, where it finally was appropriated. There were delays in being able to retain that equipment because of all the delays related to COVID. Had we done it 6 months earlier, we wouldn't, have necessarily had that delay. We're working with vendors as we speak to make that ability. So nothing since July 1st has really been delayed on our part. It's been delayed on the ability to procure the equipment. And like I said, the other aspects were just personnel, and we have that in my update, which is separate from Access Oxford.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that, one of the reasons why I just wanted to kind of get an update in terms of where things were currently is, one of the things that I'm hearing from residents, and I'm sure you hear it through your office as well, is some people miss the information on those channels because they, for whatever reason, and I think that we have a higher reliance upon internet and YouTube and things like that, but there's a big segment of our population that are just not, don't have those capabilities, but they can get reduced cable, and they throw it on the PEG channel and they watch a lovely meeting or two, and they feel like they're caught up. So, I would hope, I understand that there's been a lot of challenges, but I hope that we can get back to providing that level of service for the residents and just increase communication that way. I would, so, Excellent, thank you, I appreciate it.
Second Daniels, anything?
You mentioned a few things when you were updating us that are a little bit concerning, and I think you mentioned it was being investigated, but just trying to sum it all up, we were giving money. There's money coming from the government to the town that was going into an intermediate account straight to Access Oxford for PEG. And then when Access Oxford decided to dissolve, there was still money in that account that was supposed to be for the town to operate public access. The PEG, is that?
Well, if I may, just
Or-
one clarification.
Mhm.
It doesn't come from the government. The
Mhm.
money comes from cable users.
Okay,
In other words,
Oh,
everyone
okay.
that has cable pays a certain amount of money, and that money.
comes back to the town to provide
well,
PEG.
Yeah.
Okay,
We're also talking
Correct.
two different accounts. One was our agency account, the pass-through, and the other was, mentioned was Access Oxford's own accounts.
Right.
okay. So the money that went to, that was in Access Oxford's at that point was already gone, like not, that was theirs, or was that still supposed to be for the town to operate? PEG?
So, all I can speak to is that the agreement that the town had with the Access Oxford was that, like any contract for services, is that you pay for the services that are rendered. The difference here is that this, there was only the one submission of an annual report that looked at what services were provided the previous year, with the knowledge of whatever charter was going to give the town in the coming year. And that's how their budget was allocated, which isn't the way that we typically handle vendor contracts. We don't issue funds. That's why this was so problematic for not just this town, for any town that would do it that way, but for this town, the way it was done. So the assertion that we maintained that we should have continued to receive services because there was plenty money in reserves that we thought actually had been paid for services already rendered. And so we would have anticipated that those services would have continued because there was plenty of money in that reserve account that we may have thought would have been used for services, equipment, all of that.
But it wasn't the town's money, that was,
I think it depends on how you look at it.
okay, okay.
Services rendered are, and that's why we held firm that we were not going to continue to say that we needed to pay for the final 2 quarters because there was plenty of money there,
Okay,
okay? And I'm not saying that we all knew that at the time, but it became more apparent to us later on, yeah.
okay. And then that money disappeared with the dissolution of,
We have no, I don't know, because there's no report that's been filed that we can look at with the Secretary of State's office, or at this time, the Attorney General's office for dissolution of the entity. It just says that it was dissolved, but there's nothing that shows where the money went. Did it go to equipment? Did it go to attorney's fees to dissolve? Did it go to board members? Did it go to executive directors? I have no idea.
okay,
We don't know, and I honestly, we don't. I won't,
yeah.
I would not want to speculate.
that's all I have.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda is our town manager's report. Town manager, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item on my manager's report is to let the board know that our Finance Committee capital requests have already been sent along to our Finance Committee. So our departments have been working to put together not only their this annual coming up year's capital request, but to also reevaluate the other prospective years. As you know, when I came in as manager with our finance director, we worked with our chairman of the Finance Committee to put together a realistic 5-year capital plan. And so we're in our, going into our 4th year of that. And if the public would like to know, we are holding our meetings with department heads for those requests. And capital projects are any major non-recurring expenditure that is $25,000 or greater and have a useful life of 5 years or greater. The planning, engineering, and design services can also be considered capital, and where there's an integral to a construction, renewal, or replacement project, that would be a capital expenditure. So we now have our financial management and operations policies the town has codified in a capital planning policy as a result of the grant work that we had, money we had secured. And on November 3rd, our fire chief, on behalf of the fire EMS, presented, and it's available on YouTube for those that missed the presentation, the department's capital needs to the Finance Committee. The DPW will be on deck for November 10th, the police November 17th. The manager in the school department will be on December 1st. So, of course, we like to do all of that in advance prior to us getting into our actual operational budget, which will be towards the end of the month, that we're going to be meeting as department head and moving that request for submission forward. Roadway Borrowing Forum. As the folks are aware, we did a $5 million debt exclusion for roadway borrowing at our October special town meeting, which did pass. The item now moves into the ballot for further consideration. I know when I had stepped out, you had worked with our town clerk to solidify the election aspects to that. But prior to the town meeting, our DPW director had held a roadway forum with a number of department heads present. The material was also placed on our town website, and unfortunately, that's only a small fraction that attended, even though it was a well-attended forum, and the details of the borrowing that had been highly detailed at town meeting was only available to about 129 people. So we do plan to host another forum. I spoke with our DPW director, and we're going to be doing that during the first full week of December. And once we have the date for advertising, I'll definitely let the board know. And we'll advertise it in a number of places. So hopefully public, you're wondering what the $5 million debt exclusion roadway borrowing article is all about. You can get the basic facts about that the first week of December, if you haven't already. The third item is to let the board know, as you can see, look at that up there. This is such an exciting time. The Veterans Luncheon and the World War I Monument. As previously announced, my office had collaborated with our veterans agent to coordinate an appreciation luncheon for all our Oxford veterans. The event will be tomorrow, Wednesday, November 10th, at the Carbuncle Beach House, with seatings at 11 and 1:30. As you know, in 2019, my office had taken on the task of trying to broaden the outreach to our veterans for appreciation on Veterans Day. We typically had a very small event at the senior center, and the seniors were doing it through their donation account, and they couldn't do it that year. And so actually John Sad and I had a conversation, and he said, is there any way that you can put something together? And we did, and we had over 100 people attend in 2019, and I'm really excited because our turnout, despite a year off for COVID, we have already about 160 veterans and significant others who have RSVP'd for tomorrow. And because of that, we're doing 2 seatings. And before I go further, of course, Veterans Day is on the 11th, on Thursday. And through a grant and through COVID delays, we have been eagerly awaiting our return of our World War I monument, which had now been erected and restored with the bronze plaque, which had been affixed. It was affixed with a huge crane, and this is a mammoth piece of granite, last Friday. And actually, the engraver was here today and is coming back again tomorrow and putting on the stars in the United States of America and the town of Oxford on the whole front face. I just want to say that I know this is heartfelt, particularly for Terry Cummings, who's the head of our honor guard. I had solicited both his help and John Sad's help to pick out the design. And once you see the writing, I think it will really be very reflective. And there will also be 2 granite benches that are coming, but they're on some container ship, I think, out in the Pacific that's backlogged with everything else. So, but I'm happy. The gentleman who actually engraved the dimensions into this, which I am told is not an easy thing to do, and actually refurbished the plaque, is an 84-year-old master of the trade. So he was here today actually putting the finishing touches on the engraving. So thank you, Terry. Thank you, John. Thank you to all our veterans for your patience. And we removed the concrete deteriorating monument and placed it with something that should last much longer than concrete and solid granite. So hopefully you can come tomorrow. I would love to see anybody that can show up. It'll be great. We have a number of dignitaries, and I do want to point out that one of our keynote speakers will be our fire chief, who's also an Air Force veteran. And one of his first days prior to coming on the job was coming to and volunteering to help give our lunches out to our veterans that day. So thank you, and we're looking forward to you being able to speak tomorrow. Next item is Bandstand accessible ramp. I know there's been some speculation about all the activity at the Bandstand and through the Smolensky-Millette Charitable Trust. As you know, I've been trying to both get a grant through the Americans with Disability Mass Office for Disability for putting on a ramp, speaking with the Oxford Business Association and Larry Crowley. It's been a long-term dream to get a ramp that makes the Oxford Bandstand accessible. Since we weren't successful in getting a state grant, we put our heads together and realized that, you know, the Joslyn Park Bandstand is used for a lot of youth and children's activities, and it did meet the requirements for applying for Smolensky-Millette, and therefore we did issue, and I know Selectman Blank has been serving on that committee for this year. We did issue monies for that, but because it is town land, the DPW is the main department that's in charge of that, and so we just recently met again. It's because they've undertaken the work. It's meeting our engineer's approval. And as you can see, as you go by, there has already been a lot of activity. They're going to be putting the ramp walls and the footing. There'll be brick facade that will look very similar to what's there, and it's anticipated that the concrete contractor will form and pour those walls this week, and they're going to continue working on it as fast and as hard as they can all the way up until weather prevents them, and if that's the case, they'll resume in the spring and we'll landscape it. And I know that Carol Cudzel will be very happy for that, along with some of the Lions and anybody else who need that. Next item is, and I don't know, Chief, if you want to come up, because I know this is very exciting news to share, that the fire department and EMS department received its beautiful rescue pumper. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Madam Town Manager, members of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm very pleased that November 1st we took delivery of our Squad 1. The Squad is a designation that indicates the vehicle does multi-purpose. So this combines our former Engine 1 and Rescue 1 into one unit. The dilemma we faced before with 4 people on duty, 2 at each station, was that if we had something on 395 that required a rescue vehicle, it also requires a suppression vehicle. We'd have to find ways to staff that vehicle, and it's kind of hard with just the 4 people on duty. So this gives us the capability of having a medium to heavy rescue type capability and a suppression apparatus. So it's got 1,000 gallons of water, 30 gallons of foam. It pumps 1,500 gallons a minute, has 1,000 feet of 4-inch hose, and then all the associated rescue tools that came with it. We were able to purchase a demo unit. So it was one that the vendor already had in stock. It was demonstrating to people, because if we had not gone that route, weren't so fortunate enough, because it's really hard to even get demo units these days because of the chip problem and other supply stream difficulties. We would have probably had a 15 to 18 month wait if they had to build it from scratch. So we've got a truck. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's brand new. It's broken in. We took delivery of it. We're still waiting on more of the equipment to come in. So we have some that we've transferred over, and also part of this project was to upgrade the equipment that was on the old rescue truck, which is about 30 years old. So even though we've upgraded from hydraulic tools to battery operated, which is really important for us because it gives us that mobile capability. But oddly enough, the older technology doesn't cut some of the newer metals that cars are constructed with these days, but the newer equipment we have will. So between splitting up two trucks, we'll be able to maneuver some of our equipment to other trucks, so we'll have actual multiple capabilities with this truck, and then some of the older equipment we'll put on the other pumpers so that we can still have extrication equipment in both districts in town, and if needed, to put two pieces of equipment in operation, we can do that to effect rescue. So the truck itself, like I said, we're still waiting for some of the Amicus rescue tools to come in, and there's still one more piece of it. We took delivery of it to start breaking it in, get it all set up. We still have to train on it. It's not in service yet. It won't be in service until the vendor comes out, trains a core group of people as trainers who will then train the rest of the department. I think the 17th of November is when that training's supposed to take place. In the meantime, we're going through it, breaking it in, and then we're waiting for one more quote to come in for the final build-out. That's putting in the associated cabinetry and attachments to mount certain pieces of equipment so it's all organized properly when we go out in the field. We estimate that completion of that build-out to be in about 3 weeks. So, you're looking about first 2 weeks to mid-December, the truck should be fully operational and in service. And I will say that, so we had a committee of people on that basically designed and spec'd out the truck for what it would do. So that committee was Deputy Chiefs Sellers and Belanger, Lieutenant Mike Hudon, firefighter EMT Kevin Holstrom, firefighter paramedic Sean O'Neill, and our call firefighter Tyler Desitel and firefighter EMT Jeff Morris all served on that committee, and they did tremendous work designing a vehicle that we'll be able to use, for the next couple of decades. So I'm very proud of the work that they did and the value that they got for the town.
Thank you for that presentation.
I'll entertain any questions if you have any. All right, thank you very much.
Beautiful truck.
Sounds awesome. I mean, you got a two-for-one vehicle, and it's funny that you say that battery-operated tools are better than hydraulics. That blows my mind. Just wow.
I got to say, Mr. Chairman, I was very skeptical, and but one of the things that the crew did, I mean, they put in a lot of volunteer hours working together to spec out this truck. But they brought in 3 different vendors with 3 different sets of equipment, and we had some cars dropped off. You might have seen them if you went into the back of the fire station at headquarters. And they cut up 3 cars to test them all out to make sure that they were making the best decision for the people that they have to protect. So
they're also the ones that are going to have to use this stuff, so
Yep.
they want to make sure they can do their job properly. So
exactly.
that's great.
And it was raining on one of the nights that they did. So their philosophy is
So you
that
gotta feel.
we have to do this when whether the weather's good or not. So I'm very proud of the work that they did. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Chief. The next item is just to inform the board that our town's auditors, Roselli Clark and Associates, were back on site last week and had concluded the audit of the Oxford finances for fiscal year '21. The audit appears to have gone smoothly, and we're looking forward to receiving another positive and constructive audit. Are we not, Madam Director? Yes, we are. The next item is just entitled Unauthorized Use of the Town Seal. The YouTube channel, since we're talking about YouTube, known as Access Oxford Unofficial, has been using the town seal without the express written authorization of the Board of Selectmen. There are currently 15 videos that have been uploaded to the channel, which include various town board meetings, town forums, and an edited version of a recent candidate forum hosted by the Oxford Democratic Town Committee. As you know, the town council has sent correspondence to YouTube indicating that the use of the seal is not only misleading, but it's deceptive. But it's also in violation of Mass General Laws, Chapter 268, Section 35 in their criminal statute. So council requested YouTube to remove it because it is a violation, to prevent it from continued unlawful use of the seal, as well as to provide information to the channel owner so that the town could serve notice. We don't know who owns the channel, but it is a statutory violation. And after some correspondence with YouTube, that YouTube came back to us, said they're not in the position of mediating trademark disputes. We don't think of this as a trademark dispute, but they don't typically do that between users and trademark owners. And ultimately, they were unable to remove the content at issue. And so I'm still in contact with council to determine the best course of action to stop the unauthorized use of the seal. And hopefully, by saying this here, that anybody who knows who may own the channel can help apprise them to not continue to do that. Safe Harbor update, October 20th, 2021. The Oxford Zoning Board of Appeals submitted its assertion that the town of Oxford has a general land minimum area, also known as GLAM, in excess of 1.5%, and has invoked the Safe Harbor provision in relation to a proposed 40B project at 722 Main Street. The applicant has challenged the town's calculation, and the town and the applicant now will await the decision of DHCD. Of course, working with legal counsel, our town planner, and my office, we have asserted that the town should not have to entertain this proposed project because of this particular general land minimum area requirement that we believe allows the town to declare safe harbor. I only say this because I know that certain board members, including the ones that are here, have all either asked about this, attended the actual zoning board of appeals, which ultimately is in charge of this. But I just wanted to let you know that there has been correspondence back from the applicant to challenge the town's assertion for that. I will keep the board updated. Oxford Logistics Center. Now, that's a new one. The Oxford Land Ventures is proposing a 345,375 square foot building known as Oxford Logistics Center. The planner, myself, and a number of other people have recently had an early meeting with those individuals looking to actually put this large business on the corner of Depot Road in 95, Interstate 95. So the company is in the very early process of this. They have recently filed with the environmental notification form with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. The project basically will be located on undeveloped parcels on Depot Road near 395. There's the railway that separates the project from the local residences in the back. The proposed project is a light industrial distribution facility, building with cross-dock loading to be utilized as a distribution facility, with an associated access drive, vehicle parking, trailer parking. This really is, I know, hard to see, but we're just trying to provide as much as we can from what we know in a very early proposal. There would be drainage, utility, landscape improvements to support the use. The proposed facility will maintain 304 parking spaces for employees, 235 trailer parking spaces, and 104 loading docks. The complete E&F was included in your packet, so you have it. And it's also on file with the Board of Selectmen's office for those looking for any more detail. And at this time, as the project progresses, we'll keep the board informed. But like I said, it's very early proposal, and we're very busy with our Director of Planning and Economic Development entertaining a variety of new businesses and land development proposals. Employee health okay, sure.
Yeah, quick question. I just want to make sure, because I was questioning this myself. I was like, oh, we're building a new building. So despite the name, it's not us as the town, correct?
Correct.
Right, just for
Yeah,
clarification's sake,
that's
this
right.
is a private business trying to.
And that may
promote-
not be the name, even if it goes all the way forward, you never know. This is
Right.
the initial, the initial.
I don't want people saying, oh, we built that DPW building afterwards, so.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that
No.
it's not us.
No, I'll give you an update on what that's all about for some of the DPW workers. I wish they were going into a luxurious new distribution facility. But
you.
no
Thank you.
problem. Number 10, employee health insurance update. I wanted to let the board know, I know we've talked about the fact that Fallon Health has announced that they will be exiting most all of their commercial health insurance market. And they're going to focus predominantly on plans like Mass Health and Medicare. NFP is our insurance broker that we use to actually get the best pricing for a variety of different plans, including our health insurance. We're still in the negotiating phases with potential proposed vendors. There was an RFP that was put out. Fallon is going to be gone, July 1. We have a behemoth task of meeting a very strict schedule to work closely with our human resources, which is taking on all the benefits for both the town and school. But more importantly, we're going to be going forward with some kind of proposal. It will eventually make it here in front of the board. NFP will be before the board at some point to talk about the variety of proposals that we look at. And we will have an insurance advisory committee as well, so that they can look at what we may have available. This will come down to just major differences in pricing and plans. And so I think it will be fairly straightforward, but I'm hoping to drive down some of the percentages in perhaps what might be the final pick for us. And we're still in that phase. So I expect that it will be before you and presented to the board in the early phases of the discussions, because once we decide on this, then we have to be able to execute and move everybody's plans and all the different aspects that they have. The next item is Facilities Department Relocated. This is why I was saying about the distribution facility. So, as you know, our Facilities Division has been at the 3 Barton Street residence for a long time. And I call it a residence because it felt like that. It was very small, tight quarters. The roof was falling in, and even though we didn't have a lot of staff there still our staff, and we've been trying to come up with a solution. So the former storage room that had existed at the DPW Main Street headquarters has been converted to an office space. Our DPW director and facilities director, Jared and Mike Lupus, have put together an ability to think of how to utilize a tight space and transform it into a functional work environment. Despite that, we have a lot of supplies, and that is a place that had stored the supplies in the dilapidated garage area. So we have gotten school committee approval through the facilities department to use the discontinued wood and automotive shop right next to the Oxford Middle School for at least storage of the facilities maintenance equipment. And if they need to workshop there, they'll also have that indoors. So these moves were necessitated because the conditions were just deplorable at Barton Street. And they're going to work because they're going to continue to work because they have to shut off the utilities and secure the building on Barton Street. And we'll have a different discussion about that building some other day. But I do want to recognize the facilities department, school department, and the DPW department for working together collaboratively to make this relocation happen. When you have a huge amount of inventory, it's not easy. And then at the same time, keeping track of all the existing projects. So kudos to them for doing a fantastic job. Staffing update. I just wanted to, as you can see, our report is long. There's a lot of things that happen in addition to the town meeting and preparation that goes into that. After July 1st and having been sort of hampered last year with hirings, this year we are supplementing our departments, and there has been a lot of departments that have seen changes. But I did want to acknowledge to the board that as a municipality, I know I alluded to it about succession planning and retirements, municipal governments are having an unprecedented number of older workers that are retiring and younger workers that are seeking more meaningful jobs. And both cities and towns are making efforts to compete for people with diverse skill sets, and they need to be able to have and manage complex functions that residents are expecting municipalities to fill. The MMA has done a lot of research recently because they see this as a crucial problem, and it is. We witnessed that when we were looking for a director for public health in the middle of a pandemic. We witnessed that when we were looking for a clerk in the middle of a pandemic. There's a lot of retirements that take place, and sometimes you're competing with your next-door neighbors and trying to hire people, or we're competing with larger municipalities to get qualified people who know how to work in a municipality. However, despite all that, I'm just very pleased to state we've recently filled the following positions: a senior clerk in the office of the town clerk's office, assistant assessor, that was an internal transfer of another administrative assistant who's worked their way up, light equipment operator, community center program coordinator, a community center senior activity coordinator, a part-time videographer, and the executive assistant to the police chief, which was an internal transfer. We are in the interview or hiring stages for the following positions actively right now: Director of Public Health, Media Production Coordinator, intermittent winter laborer, and the RTA van driver. We're also seeking applicants for the following positions: the Administrative Assistant to the Board of Health, Administrative Assistant to the Town Manager's Office, snow removal contractors, and on-call positions at the Fire EMS Department. When you put all of those together, when we talk about interviewing and evaluating people, it's a lot of work in addition to everything else. So we've been extremely busy, but I do feel we're getting, right now, we're getting a much higher application cohort in terms of skill set and in terms of experience than we were previously. And I think that is because people really do want to come to the town of Oxford to work and seek out employment, and I think that speaks to it. The last item on my manager's report is about COVID-19 recovery legislation. I just wanted to point out our numbers for COVID have been declining this past month in comparison to the last 3 months, so our public health nurses are doing a great job, and I feel that's a very positive sign. Hopefully through the upcoming holidays, that will remain that way. I had met with, virtually anyway, with the MassVax bus people to try to see if we can get the large Commonwealth bus out here. It's just going to be a matter of working out a date and also securing at least 25 in advance booster requests or vaccination requests. And so we're going to work with the Board of Health on that part of it. But the recovery legislation, as you've been hearing about all this money supposedly out there for COVID recovery efforts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has upwards of $5 billion to try to figure out how to spend. And so they just spent over $3 billion, at least in one of the houses in the legislature. The Senate is taking it up this week. But in the House of Representatives, Representative McKenna and Frost worked with my office to propose several amendments to the recently filed an act relative to immediate COVID-19 recovery needs. There was an awful lot of infrastructure allowed in the actual bill, and I'm pleased to report that a amendment filed by Representative McKenna and supported by Representative Frost in the amount of $50,000 was actually retained in the House version, and we expect it will be maintained all the way through to assist us and help us in funding the replacement of the North Fire Station. So it did pass the House deliberation, and we appreciate both representatives for advocating and helping the town in this important way, which helps us offset a capital need that is actually going towards the department that had some of the most direct and what you would consider to be realistic encounters with COVID and the entire pandemic. And so putting on a new roof seems like a small thing, but it's a big thing to make sure we have good facilities for our paramedics and firefighters. And that would conclude my manager's report.
All right, thank you very much. Selectmen's community announcements. Selectman LeBlanc.
Jen, just to clarify, we're not replacing the north station, it's just the roof, right?
Yeah, I thought I said that.
Yeah.
I didn't. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's a long night. Sorry.
That's right. my phone will be, I'm surprised my phone's not blowing up. We got a new DPW facility and a new fire department.
There you go. No, not yet. All right. Thank you for the clarification.
I have a couple of things. One, a few weeks ago, I actually attended the wake of an individual who passed away in our town, Sally Johnson. She lived on Rocky Hill Road for many, many years in Oxford, and you're probably wondering, what's the deal? And she was the first woman to run for a Board of Selectmen position in Oxford. And her family was very lovely, and they're very welcoming, and I thank them for allowing me to come and pay my respects. And I don't believe she ever did serve on the board, but the fact that she took that step to run, was a building block for some of us. So I just wanted to pass along my condolences to the family. And on a larger passing away note, the president or board of chairman of IPG passed away a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Valentin Gapontsev. He was the founder of IPG. He lived here. He lived in Worcester, and very instrumental to a lot of growth in our town. They moved their headquarters to Oxford in 1998. And, we've done some TIFs with them, but they've really been, for the most part, in my opinion, a good business partner. They've done some things for the town, and, they've certainly have put our name on the map in many ways as well. So I just wanted to pass along my condolences to all of the people over at IPG, and we're very grateful that they're here. And, we're sorry that they've got that passing of their leadership, so. And my last comment is I just want to say, I think that monument in the center of town looks absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful. Hard to believe that all came out of a request to just clean something up, right? So it looks beautiful, and it's wonderful to have that done prior to Veterans Day. So thank you for getting that done. And that's all I have.
Right. Well, you're right about Mr. Valentine. That he was a nice, just generally a nice guy. If you ever met him, he just very personable.
Yes.
Very personable. Thank you for that. Selectman Daniels.
I have no announcements this evening.
All right, thank you. Well, I would just like to send out a personal recognition too to the facilities department, school department, and of course DPWs. I think they're the greatest. They're just phenomenal people, and it's just again, I know I've said it I don't know how many times, but we are so lucky in this town to have employees like we have, and the departments that we have. It's phenomenal. And then I'll slide right into just thanking the fire department. Those employees that designed that Squad 1 vehicle, they're the ones that are using it. They're the ones that know what they need for a good vehicle. And I'm sure the chief was a major component of that whole design. And as a resident, I thank you. I hope I never need it, but I thank you very much, so. And the last thing I have is that I believe this is going to be our last meeting before the end of the month, so I would like to just wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the family, without COVID. It's hopefully we can all get together and enjoy each other and have a fun time. And that's all I have, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make that motion.
Second the motion.
And I will call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 3 in affirmative, 1 absent. We are adjourned. Thank you all for attending and for viewing.